Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder, to the tank review on the Challenger Mark 3, and this is now the end-of-the-line British main battle tank at a battle rating of 9.7. So the Challenger Mark 3, does it actually differ at all from the Challenger Mark 2? And I have to say, in 2 or 3 aspects it does, but at the end of the day, if you look at the fully upgraded version, it is simply a 390,000 RP backup tank that you still have to spade. And while the stock grind is not as hefty as with the Challenger Mark II, it is still not the world's greatest tank in the first place in direct comparison to its main competitors and also the main ally, which are the Americans with their Abrams series of tanks. And versus that tank, this tank, well, doesn't look all that great. Is it really exaggerating if I say that I feel like the American sidekick in this tank? Well, it's debatable. Now, I want to compare this tank to, again, as I said, its main competition on the battlefield, and then point out some of the strengths and weaknesses for you to know how to play this tank and if it is worth going after in the first place. So let's begin with the armor. And there we can see that the main advantage of the Challenger Mark III is that it has a Roamer era package, especially over the lower glacis, and also on the side here we have also some era side skirts. The turret and the upper front glacis, which would be most exposed in a hull down position, which is the tank's design approach, I guess. Well, there is no protection, there is just some additional structural steel. So the rest of the armor is not really convincing, 38mm and 20mm, and the back of the turret and the hull are not really that strong. And then we are also riddled with weak spots on the engine deck, very weak 8mm and 20mm. 20mm here, so the deck is not all that great. Now, behind this rolled homogeneous armor, we can see that the tank has some era plates, but the NERA plates, sorry about this, so the composite armor. But first of all, the lower glacis is completely unprotected. The side here has a little bit of additional protection, spaced armor, era protection at least once, but here this section is completely unprotected. As I said, the lower glacis is unprotected. The turret ring is a big weak spot, then the area around the gun, where it can easily always damage the gun breech, like with every other main battle tank at rank 6, or at least at top tier. And then also the big gap in the armor, that is the driver's edge, where it's so thin that, well, I'm not exaggerating, SPA can easily punch through, and that is just not really nice. So the tank looks cool, but the armor isn't, and that is just simple how it is. However, I have to say, if you then look at the X-ray further, we can see that there is a bit of trolling going on the side where there is the usual 20mm plating, because those fuel tanks, they just screw a little bit with the penetration values, and I'm not quite sure if one can see this, but there is another 38mm of rolled homogeneous armor behind this. So very often the side is a bit trolly, but you should not rely on it. And if you then further look into the X-ray, the tank is just filled with ammunition everywhere. In the back of the turret, in the front of the turret, next and around the driver, and then just in front of the power pack, consisting of transmission, engine, and, as I said, in the side, the fuel tanks. So yeah, even removing a large portion is not really reducing the blow-up capacities of this tank. 4 crew members, in the middle the driver, then also here the loader, and then we also have the gunner and the commander on the left hand side. So the tank's survivability and overall armor protection are not that really great. But I have to say that the upper frontal glacis is significantly weaker than even the turret. So with the turret, that Mk.3 from the Type 90 penetrates, maybe some other freak shots, but overall the turret itself is resilient, but nobody shoots there because you just shoot at the gun and you take out the tank anyway, or cripple it, then you can just charge it, put a shell through the lower glacis, and that's about it. So the era protection only works once, and it's not even that reliable. I've been penned here with heat very often, and at this battle rating nobody really fires heat except the helicopters. So this is the quick rundown on the armor and the exterior of the Challenger Mark III. It is not the greatest tank that there is. Even at long range in a hull down position, it is vulnerable. As it is good tradition, let's continue with the mobility, and there we can see we have the second weakest engine for the heaviest tank, even significantly heavier than the Challenger 1 Mark II. Very confusing, and that gives us a very low horsepower to ton ratio for a main battle tank in comparison of 18.3. So a lot of the main battle tanks have between 40 and 60% more horsepower to ton ratio. Also, we have a limited top speed of 56 kilometers per hour, whereas then the other fast tanks like the Type 90 Leo 2A4 are going with 73 kilometers per hour. However, then we do the full French thing in reverse and we go with minus 36 kilometers per hour, which is not bad, but does it really save the tank? I don't really know. The problem is the responsive time to actually all sorts of control inputs, and despite having neutral steering, the tank doesn't really flip around, so you cannot really react to threats, at least with your hull, that appear on your side. Let's have a look at the overall firepower and gun handling. Now let's talk about the business end of the tank, which is the L11A5 120mm rifled gun with 52 rounds, so far very average. The reload on the other hand is discussable, and all other tanks have either a faster reload or an auto-loading system, and despite beating here with the reload the TATB has here, even with a stock crew, a 7.1 seconds reload with the auto-loading system, whereas with the Challenger 1 Mark II and 3 you need to have an ace crew to reach the 6.7 seconds, and they are still much slower than the IPM-1, the Type 90 and the Leopard 2A4, and you're on par with the Mk.3 here. However, also, I have to say that if you lose your commander, if you have just an expert qualification, if you then are down to 2 crew members, you're significantly longer with your reload, so you cannot win a standoff duel in this respect when you both shoot at the same time, surprise each other, and the shells are with no effect. Then you just simply lose the follow-up shot, and you cannot really get out of the situation fast enough. So this kind of sums up the tank. The turret rotation speed on the other hand, with 31 degrees per second, is okayish, I guess. Gun depression and elevation are excellent, and the elevation speed is far from being the best, but in good company with the Mk.3 and also, surprisingly enough, the Type 90. The first stock shell is the Shell L31A7 hash round, and the muzzle velocity is very bad, 670 meters per second, but you're used to from this kind of behavior from the previous British tanks. And then also the penetration 152 millimeters increases actually with the angle that you attack it. It is mostly useless versus side armor and front armor of main battle tanks, except if you have exceptional aim with it, and it is very good for hull breaking stuff, but overall in times of era protection and near protection, composite armor in general, a lot of spaced armor, this tank shell is not really one's favorite. But since you have the lack of a 50 cal on top of your tank, I advise to still carry some more with you to just hull break the enemies, to lob a shell over a ridgeline in certain situations. It's never bad to have some of them, but it's certainly not your first pick. So far, the Challenger 1 Mark III has not proven to be exciting in any way, shape or form with its performance as stated here with the statistics. However, now we are looking at the second stock shell, which is the Shot L23. And yes, that is a stock AP FSDS round, and not a bad one either. 1535 meters per second muzzle velocity, 410 millimeters of raw penetration. It just doesn't have positive normalization, but it's actually not that far off. And I have to say, since you're mostly shooting either the lower plate or the side armor or the weak spot, which is the gun breech, gun barrel, and just the turret ring area of an enemy tank in the first place, it doesn't really matter if you have 350 or 450 millimeters of penetration, you will damage the enemy tank anyway. And then to penetrate here the composite armor of an enemy main battle tank is always debatable and challenging, so I would still go for the safe shot. As a tier 4 upgrade, you then have the shot L23A1, which is also an AP FSDS shell, but it's a long stock grind that you get it, and initially it doesn't really look all that promising. Roughly the same muzzle velocity, 1535 meters per second, only 5 millimeters more of raw penetration, that is true, going up to 415 millimeters. However, we gain a massive improvement in penetration values against sloped armor, with now very significant positive normalization. Maybe not as good as the Type 90's Mk.3 or also the Mk.3's AP FSDS, but it is certainly better in this way than the American 105mm upgraded AP FSDS on the Abrams. But I have to say that the shell simply hits hard. It has decent post-penetration damage effect, it flies through, it's easy to aim, it's relatively accurate. There is nothing to really complain about. It's just a challenge to get the gun on target before you get shot. So now in the background you can probably see the most perfect position ever, more on this in a moment. Now at tier 3 you have finally the chance to decide yourself between the L34 smoke shell or the smoke grenades, and I would pick the smoke grenades. You have 2 charges of them before you have to refill them in the capture zone, and you mostly want to use them when your gun or your firepower in general is compromised and you are in great danger of being then finished off. You want to retreat in the cover of smoke, and so I would use here the smoke grenades. Finally, let's have a shell comparison. In the HE department, I still would prefer the T80B's HE shell with the splash damage. It's more reliable, where then the hash round has to deal with composite armor, spaced armor, era protection, you name it, and that is just not really the perfect meta. Then the AP FSDS, despite having great penetration value, here on the stat card you can see it is never something special. On the other hand, it is AP FSDS. It's still all about AP FSDS, like it always has been at top tier for the last 2 years, I guess. It feels like 2 years. And yeah, the muzzle velocity is also not the greatest, but it's not really bad, okay? It's still usable. And while we have no ATGM versus helicopters, while we have no heat defense for hull breaking with a faster muzzle velocity, I still think the tank can work. But if you insist on that being hull down is a tank's strength, then it must do this with all consequences. And this is where this tank just simply is not great. I mean, can this not be done by a Type 90? Is it impossible for a T80B to do the same? What stops an Abrams from camping right there and having a higher rate of fire with more possible hits of knocking the enemy out? So that is always the question that remains. But maybe I see it the other way. I know that the tank is not meant as a frontline tank, although it is very beneficial for War Thunder meta purposes to be able to then push somewhere to just simply turn around. And, you know, who can be really mad with this tank if you have situations like these? You just absorb the punishment, you're hull down, and you finish off the enemy tank in a gunnery duel. Yes, I lost here my commander, but, you know, details, right? So, from my commentary, you can see that you can hear it between the lines that I say that I'm not really too impressed with the tank, but it's more like the overall meta that I'm really bored with, not so much with the tank. Having said this, the stock grind is definitely better than with the Challenger 1 Mark II, where the APDS, the stock APDS is, yeah, awful. In other news, maybe it is beneficial to not be the first in line. If the enemy Russia lines and your Russia lines, or your tanks that rush and the enemy tank that rush, just clashing it out in the very beginning, then you just are alive. You need to stay alive. You just need to finish off. Look at those tanks. They are actually breaching through our lines and I'm cleaning them up, okay? And I try to go back here in cover, but then there is this one tank that I not just missed a kill on, but then I just tried to move into this position, and a camping position always can get flanked. So let's have a look at this kill shot. Okay, T-64A, powerful gun, and it goes straight through the add-on plating, the composite armor, and delivers a crew knockout with one shot. So here the final gameplay that I want to present you is on Normandy, and I do something unexpected. I rush the middle. Do I recommend this? Not really, but I have to say it was very surprising how often this paid off, and then shots like these and scenes like these tend to happen. So the shell just gets absorbed here by the composite armor, and then did you see what the enemy tank did here? He shot my gun breech. He didn't shoot my lower glacis, he didn't shoot my side armor, he didn't shoot straight through the turret cheeks. No, he went for the gun breech. Like every single tank at top tier is really doing this. So I'm not so much annoyed with this overall, with the tank's performance overall, but I'm more bored with the meta. There are helicopters everywhere, there are BMP2s, there are all the troll vehicles, and I think the greatest advantage, again, that this tank has, and I know you have heard this 1,000 times, is that it fights with the Americans. So you never have to deal with a tank that is as fast, as maneuverable, has as great gun handling and that much survivability and so many gimmicks like the 3 Abrams tank that the Americans have. That's just simply a fact. That's just, it has the advantage of being a real fact in every single discussion. And to have then a tank that plays significantly different is always an advantage. Now look at this. I use here the stock shell in the majority of gameplays that I showed you. You saw the performance of the stock shell, not the upgraded shell, which is in the 2 slot. And I very rarely used here hash rounds. Now here this Soviet tank, well, he didn't have the gun depression to shoot me, and before he could realize it, I pumped an APFSDS straight into his gun barrel, and so he had to actually reverse. And I just simply didn't see here the Leopard, and before I realized where he is, which was just a split second before he shot, he took out my driver. While I disable him here, and I would have killed him, then he gets finished off. So yeah, there is a lot of teamwork going on. One final word about the mobility. In a straight line over open terrain, the tank is actually not that much smaller than an Abrams. Either that or all the tanks that I played with today were stock, so it's up to you to choose from this. I personally think the tank is not as bad, honestly, as all the stats suggest. I know it is a very old saying from me, you know, APFSDS is just doing what APFSDS is doing. You either go for the weak spots or you just aim at the same weak spot that every single tank in the game shares, which is just the area around the gun breech and also the turret ring. And again, I just have the real feeling looking at all the footage, just thinking about it, letting the tank's performance reflect for a moment. Maybe a bit more a patient playstyle at top tier, as surprising as it is, how often I was just flanked in my Soviet tanks. Maybe this is paying off with this tank that just has a very different meta to the German and Soviet tanks. The arguments go round and round in circles. It's always the same. The main actor at top tier is just simply the Abrams. And this is a daily experience. Whenever you play with every single nation, you either play with them or against them. They dictate the battle. It is upon them to decide it. And that's just how it is. So here I catch a random APFSDS round, and I hear the tank near me. I'm about to repair, and I'm simply insulted by this tank ignoring me that hard. On the other hand, I think it's good for the kill to death ratio, if you give anything about that. So I smoke myself up again. This is where the 2 smoke charges come in handy, and if you then have either long reload or a damaged gun breach, your smoke shell is not all that useful, so in later games I just simply dropped it. Again, I'm using here the stock APFSDS round, which in my opinion deals with all the enemies good enough. And if you want more, then you have to play a different tank, in my opinion. Overall, that saves you money. The stock grind then is really not that bad, okay? And in this respect, maybe the tank is a little bit better. And if the mobility is not that competitive as well, maybe, just maybe, the era protects you once in 10 games where you would fail with the Challenger 1 Mark II, despite having a little bit more horsepower to ton ratio and therefore just a touch better mobility with the Mark II than compared with the Mark III. On the other hand, always only going forward, you would miss kills like these. Watch that. I reverse, and I reverse, and I reverse still more, and hello there. Yeah, high tier gameplay. It is chaotic as it ever has been. And I'm just chilling here, just waiting for an enemy tank to come by. This is where I can then say it's frontline camping. And, you know, if I then would go back by 50 meters, I would be in the capture zone where every enemy tank expects me. If I'm here, already people would suggest that I'm, or, you know, they would say that I'm spawn camping if they want to say something bad about me. And others say this is a tactical ambush if somebody is saying, you know, I'm the greatest tanker that there is, which of course is not true. What I want to say is there is just so much that you can do with this tank, but maybe that's just good enough. Maybe that's all a tank needs to do. Now, there is an upcoming funny battle, and after this XM1 has extinguished his fire, we might see it. So our team has the advantage now with the capture zones and the sheer player numbers, and I'm just waiting. I'm just looking around. I'm just listening. Is a tank coming in one way or the other? Very often if I make an ambush, I just don't react quickly enough to a threat, or I just get damaged in the gun barrel or the gun breech. And so to have here a proper ambush to open up all the possibilities is what you can watch out for in every single tank. Now when it comes to the survivability, it actually sometimes can take a punishment, but I don't know why. There is no logical explanation for it. It's not magical, but sometimes there are shots where I'm deeply convinced that a bit more should have happened, where the ammunition doesn't get hit and all those funny shenanigan things. So yeah, there is so much smoke, it just simply could be RRB. And there we go, that's the BMP2. He killed the first XM1, the second XM1, and I'm just like, okay, where is this guy? I need to finish him off. On the other hand, I don't want to be his next victim. So going around a corner like this, you could drift with a Type 90 or with an Mk.3 or with you know, one of the Abrams, and just have better frontal, or you just can then expose your frontal armor rather than your side armor. And then we have we hear the BMP2 again. Man, that's just such a party tank. And I should have gotten that way. So I go the other way around, and then I watch the drama unfold on the minimap. The map is about to end. And where is he? Where is he? Come on, where are you? I hear him to the left. He killed the Scholkal Dalet. Come on! Save the SBA! Ah, no, he killed the M42, but I know exactly where he is. Okay, I need to drift around the corner. Take some speed, take some speed, take some speed. And then there is the end of the game, the lag, and I just, yeah, have this lag here. That was a great ambush. But the kill didn't count anymore. So let's have a quick look at the post-battle results. Let's see what the 1 cap, the 4 assists and the 5 kills were worth. And we can see that we earned quite a hefty amount of silver lines, 53,000 with an additional, what is it, 17,500, so that's not bad. And since we used the stock shell, that's pure profit. Also nearly 4,800 research points, so there you can see the results. The tank is not that expensive in terms of running, so that's another advantage compared to the Abrams. So it is a very interesting tank after you have given it a fair chance. But it's not one of the gold players. It's certainly none of those tanks that is really the shiniest that there is. And that scene, oh boy, that was the clutchiest shot ever. Finally, I think the tank could be worse. Honestly, the tank could be worse. One final upcoming scene here. Watch the Type 90's ammo rack. Save him. Finally, that's it for me today as well. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder. Sadly, no kill.